His hands trembled as the coffee cup slipped, crashing to the floor. No one moved to help. Not his son, not the nurses, no one. Just a waitress watching a millionaire's father choke back tears in a crowded café. She didn't know that one decision, to take him home, would rewrite both their lives and expose a secret his family had buried for years. 7 years later, when his son returns, nothing will ever be the same. If you believe no amount of money can replace genuine love and presence, then hit subscribe right now. Only the cold-hearted and self-absorbed would scroll past without doing it. What if the greatest gift you could give someone cost nothing but meant everything? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Maxwell Jones sat at his usual table near the window of Rosewood Café, his hands trembling slightly as he raised his coffee cup to his lips. At 60, he'd already learned that illness doesn't discriminate, and wealth doesn't guarantee companionship. The designer watch his son had sent for his birthday gleamed against his wrist, a cold reminder of the distance between expensive gestures and genuine presence. Lisa Bryan had been noticing him for 3 months now. This distinguished older gentleman, who ordered black coffee and oatmeal every morning, sat for hours with books. His shaking hands struggled to hold steady. She didn't know that behind those kind, tired eyes lay a story of abandonment that would soon transform both their futures forever. Sometimes the family we choose means more than the family we're born into. Where are you watching from tonight? Lisa had been working double shifts at Rosewood Café for 2 years, ever since dropping out of her nursing program, when the tuition became too much to bear. At 23, the small neighborhood restaurant wasn't her dream, but it was honest work, and she'd grown to care deeply for the regulars who'd become like extended family. None touched her heart quite like Maxwell, though. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he'd arrive at precisely 8 a.m., wearing the same pressed blue cardigan, order his usual breakfast, and spend hours attempting to read despite the visible tremor in his hands. The books changed, but the loneliness never did. "You don't have to spend your whole morning here if you're just looking for company, Mr. Jones," she'd said gently one afternoon, refilling his coffee for the 3rd time. "I mean, you're always welcome, but there are community centers nearby, activities for people like me." Maxwell had looked up at her with eyes that held decades of quiet resignation. "My son thinks the assisted living facility he moved me to has plenty of activities. He's very busy with his real estate empire, you see. Important acquisitions, major deals. I just complicate things." Lisa learned that Maxwell's son, Richard, owned luxury properties across 3 states and had recently relocated his father from the family home where he'd lived with his late wife, Catherine. The visits had started as weekly dinners, then monthly check-ins, then nothing but automated bank transfers and the occasional impersonal text message. Catherine had passed 2 years ago, and the grief seemed to have made Maxwell invisible to the one person who should have cared most. "He sends money," Maxwell would say, staring out at the street with unfocused eyes. "Always sends money. But money can't hold your hand when the tremors get bad, you know? Money can't sit with you when the nights stretch too long." If you've ever seen someone try to replace love with money, hit that like button and subscribe. Let's drown out the idea that care can be bought. Lisa knew about long nights. She'd had plenty since her grandmother passed in a nursing home where staff checked boxes, but nobody truly knew her name. She also knew about resilience, about the small daily kindnesses that keep people anchored when everything else slips away. She started bringing Maxwell the day's fresh soup, claiming the kitchen always made too much. She'd sit with him during slow periods, listening to stories about Catherine and the art gallery they'd run together before Parkinson stole his ability to paint. But last Tuesday morning, Maxwell's regular seat by the window remained empty. Lisa glanced at the clock every 20 minutes, her concern growing with each passing hour. By noon, she couldn't ignore the knot in her stomach any longer. But last Tuesday morning, Maxwell's regular seat by the window remained empty. Lisa glanced at the clock every 20 minutes, her concern growing with each passing hour. By noon, she couldn't ignore the knot in her stomach any longer. She called the assisted living facility during her break, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number Maxwell had scribbled on a napkin weeks ago. The administrator's voice was professionally distant, rattling off information like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Mr. Jones experienced a severe Parkinson's episode yesterday evening. He's at Mercy General Hospital, stable but under observation. We've been trying to reach his son, but apparently he's on vacation somewhere overseas. The Maldives, I think. His assistant said he'll be back next week. Next week. The words echoed in Lisa's mind as she stood outside the hospital's main entrance that evening, still wearing her café uniform. The building loomed before her, all glass and steel and sterility, so different from the warm wooden booths and coffee-scented air of Rosewood Café. She'd always hated hospitals. The fluorescent lights that made everyone look half-dead, the antiseptic smell that couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of fear and sickness, the hushed conversations that never brought good news. Her grandmother had died in a place like this, not in the arms of family telling her she was loved, but alone in a curtained-off bed while nurses charted vital signs and doctors discussed test results in the hallway. Lisa took a deep breath and pushed through the revolving doors. The 4th floor smelled of disinfectant and despair. Lisa's sneakers squeaked against the polished linoleum as she approached the nurse's station, her heart hammering against her ribs. A middle-aged nurse with kind eyes looked up from her computer screen. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Maxwell Jones, room 412. The nurse's expression shifted to professional sympathy. "Are you family? We have restricted visiting hours for non-family members." Lisa hesitated for only a heartbeat. "I'm his goddaughter." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but the alternative was leaving Maxwell alone in that room, wondering if anyone cared enough to show up. The nurse studied her face and Lisa held her breath, waiting for the challenge that would expose her deception. Instead, the nurse's expression softened. "Room 412 is down the hall, last door on the left. He'll be glad to see you. He's been asking for someone all day." Lisa's throat tightened. "Thank you." The door to room 412 stood slightly ajar, and through the gap, Lisa could see the edge of a hospital bed, the rhythmic beep of monitors, the dim glow of medical equipment. She paused in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing here? What could she, a 23-year-old waitress barely making rent, possibly offer a man who needed real medical care, real support? Then she heard it, a small broken sound that might have been her name. "Lisa." She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Maxwell looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. The tremor in his hands was more pronounced now, and his skin had taken on a grayish pallor under the harsh fluorescent lights. Tubes ran from his arms to IV bags, and monitors tracked his vital signs with insistent electronic beeps. But his eyes, when they met hers, flooded with relief so profound it nearly broke her. "You came," he whispered, his voice rough and slurred, each word requiring visible effort. "I didn't think anyone would come." Lisa crossed the room in 3 quick steps and took his hand, careful of the IV line. "Of course I came. You think I'd let you face this alone?" Tears slipped down Maxwell's weathered cheeks. "Richard, he's in the Maldives. Important vacation. Couldn't reach him." "I know," Lisa said softly, squeezing his hand. "But I'm here now." They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor and the distant shuffle of nurses in the hallway. Lisa watched Maxwell's chest rise and fall, his breathing labored but steady, and felt something shift inside her. A decision crystallizing, forming itself without her conscious permission. "Mr. Jones," she began, then stopped, started again. "Maxwell, when they discharge you, you're coming home with me." His eyes widened. "Lisa, no, I can't ask you to do that." You're not asking. I'm offering. The words came out more forcefully than she'd intended, but she didn't soften them. I know my place isn't much. It's a studio apartment, barely bigger than this hospital room, and I'm not a nurse yet, but I know how to care for people. I know how to show up. You have your own life, your studies, your work. Maxwell's voice cracked. I'm just a burden. Richard says I need professional care, a facility with trained staff who know how to handle someone like me. Someone like you? Lisa felt anger flare in her chest. You're not a diagnosis, Maxwell, you're a person. And you don't need people who know how to handle you. You need people who care about you. The image of her grandmother flashed through her mind. 93 years old, lying in a nursing home bed, calling out names of family members who never visited. The staff had been professional, efficient, checking vitals and administering medications right on schedule. But nobody had held her hand. Nobody had sat with her and listened to her stories. Nobody had made her feel like her life still mattered. I watched my grandmother die in a place with professional care, Lisa said quietly. They kept her alive, but they didn't give her a reason to live. I won't let that happen to you. Maxwell's hand tightened around hers, his tremor making the grip unsteady but no less meaningful. Child, you barely know me. I know enough. I know you take your coffee black because Catherine always said cream masked the flavor. I know you can't paint anymore, but you still remember every color you mixed for her portrait. I know you leave tips you can't afford because you remember what it's like to struggle. I know you're kind, and you're lonely, and you deserve better than what you're getting. A soft knock interrupted them. A woman in a navy blazer stepped into the room, clipboard in hand. I'm Sarah Mitchell, the discharge coordinator. I understand we need to discuss care arrangements for Mr. Jones. Lisa straightened her shoulders. Yes, he'll be staying with me during his recovery. Sarah's professionally neutral expression didn't change, but her eyes flicked from Lisa's café uniform to Maxwell's expensive watch, clearly calculating the mismatch. I see. And you are? His goddaughter. The lie came easier this time. And your living situation? I have a studio apartment in the Riverside district. It's small, but it's on the ground floor, no stairs. I work mornings at Rosewood Cafe, but I can adjust my schedule. I'm also taking online nursing courses, so I understand basic care protocols. Sarah made notes on her clipboard. Mr. Jones will need assistance with daily activities, medication management, physical therapy appointments. His Parkinson's requires monitoring and... I understand the requirements, Lisa interrupted. I know it won't be easy. I know my apartment isn't ideal, but I also know that healing requires more than medical checklists. It requires someone who shows up every day, not because they're paid to, but because they choose to. Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. You know what? I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I can spot the difference between someone who's going through the motions and someone who genuinely cares. Mr. Jones is lucky to have you. She turned to Maxwell. Is this arrangement acceptable to you, sir? Maxwell looked at Lisa, his eyes shining with tears he was too proud to let fall. More than acceptable. Then let's start the discharge paperwork. You'll need home health visits twice a week, and I'll arrange for a physical therapist to do home sessions. Sarah paused at the door. For what it's worth, you're doing a good thing. Not many people your age would take this on. After Sarah left, Maxwell broke down completely. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Lisa moved to sit on the edge of the bed, wrapping her arms around him as carefully as she could manage around the medical equipment. I feel invisible, he whispered against her shoulder. Richard hasn't visited in 8 months. 8 months, Lisa. He calls occasionally, sends money transfers, but he doesn't see me. It's like I stopped being his father and became just another obligation on his spreadsheet. You're not invisible to me. I'm terrified, Maxwell admitted. Terrified of ending up in one of those facilities where they park you in front of a television and forget you exist, where your name becomes a room number and your life becomes a medication schedule, where you wait to die instead of finding reasons to live. That won't happen. I promise you, Maxwell, that won't happen. He pulled back to look at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than resignation in his eyes. Hope, fragile and uncertain, but undeniably there. You're an angel, Lisa Bryan, you know that? She smiled through her own tears. I'm just a waitress who cares. No, Maxwell said firmly, his voice gaining strength despite the tremor. Your family, the kind that matters. The next morning, Sarah returned with unexpected news. We've reached Richard Jones. He's cutting his vacation short and flying back. He should arrive tomorrow evening. Lisa felt her stomach drop. She'd been so focused on Maxwell's immediate needs that she hadn't thought about what would happen when Richard finally showed up. Would he be angry? Grateful? Suspicious of her motives? Maxwell's reaction was even more complicated. Relief flickered across his face, followed quickly by anxiety. Richard's coming home? For me? Of course for you, Lisa said, though doubt crept into her voice. You're his father. But Maxwell didn't look convinced. He picked at the hospital blanket with trembling fingers, his expression distant. He'll want to move me to that expensive facility he's been researching, the one with the golf course and the art therapy program. He showed me the brochure once, $10,000 a month, and it looked like a hotel lobby. Beautiful and completely impersonal. Maybe he's changed, Lisa offered, not believing her own words. Maybe. Maxwell didn't sound convinced either. They spent the rest of the day in quiet preparation. Lisa helped Maxwell with the physical therapy exercises the occupational therapist demonstrated, supporting his weight as he practiced standing and walking with a walker. His movements were unsteady, and frustration creased his features with each difficult step, but he persevered. You're doing great, Lisa encouraged as he made it across the room for the third time. I used to paint murals that covered entire walls, Maxwell said bitterly. Now I celebrate walking 10 feet without falling. Progress is progress. Catherine would be proud. His expression softened. She would have liked you. You have her determination. Her refusal to accept what everyone else says is impossible. As evening fell and visiting hours ended, Lisa reluctantly prepared to leave. Maxwell caught her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Thank you, he said simply, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for caring when you didn't have to. I'll be back tomorrow, Lisa promised, before Richard arrives. Lisa? Maxwell's voice stopped her at the door. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Richard says or decides, I want you to know that you've already changed my life. You've reminded me that kindness still exists in this world. Lisa smiled, though tears blurred her vision. You've reminded me why I wanted to be a nurse in the first place, to make a difference one person at a time. As she walked through the hospital parking lot, Lisa's phone buzzed with a text from her manager asking if she could cover an extra shift. She looked back at the building, at the fourth-floor window where Maxwell's room glowed with soft light. Tomorrow, Richard would arrive, bringing with him money, resources, and expectations. Tomorrow, decisions would be made that would determine Maxwell's future. Tomorrow, everything would change. Neither of them knew that Richard's return would force decisions that couldn't be undone. Neither could predict how a chance encounter in a café would become the catalyst for 3 lives to transform completely. All Lisa knew, standing in the parking lot under the fluorescent lights, was that she'd made a choice to care, and she wouldn't back down from it, no matter what tomorrow brought. Have you ever helped a stranger in need? Share your story in the comments. Richard Jones arrived at Mercy General Hospital like a man accustomed to commanding attention. His designer suit was immaculate despite the 20-hour flight from the Maldives, his Italian leather shoes clicking confidently against the hospital floor. The tan from his vacation gave him a glow that seemed obscene in the fluorescent-lit corridor where people came to face their mortality. At 38, he carried himself with the assurance of someone who'd built a multi-million-dollar real estate empire from scratch, a man who solved problems with checkbooks and never doubted his solutions. The nurse at the station straightened when he approached, responding to that indefinable quality of wealth and authority. Maxwell Jones, room 412. I'm his son. Of course, Mr. Jones. Your father is stable. There's been someone with him, a young woman who said she was his goddaughter. Richard's expression flickered with irritation. Goddaughter? My father doesn't have a goddaughter. He didn't wait for a response, striding down the corridor with the purposeful gait of someone whose time was valuable. Through the partially open door of room 412, he could see his father sitting up in bed, and beside him, a young black woman in a café uniform, her hand resting gently on his father's arm. They were laughing about something, a moment of easy companionship that stopped abruptly when Richard pushed the door fully open. Dad. Maxwell's expression transformed instantly, joy mixing with apprehension. Richard, you came home. Of course I came home. Richard's eyes swept over Lisa, taking quick inventory. Young, working class, no obvious credentials to be caring for his father. His voice cooled several degrees. And who exactly are you? Lisa stood, meeting his gaze with quiet dignity. I'm Lisa Bryan. I work at Rosewood Café where your father has breakfast. I'm his friend. His friend. Richard's tone made it sound like an accusation. He glanced at his father's expensive watch, the designer clothing folded neatly on the visitor's chair, then back to Lisa's worn sneakers and rumpled uniform. How convenient that you've become such good friends with my father during his vulnerable time. Richard, that's not fair, Maxwell protested, but his son raised a hand. Dad, I need to speak with you alone. Lisa squeezed Maxwell's shoulder. I'll wait outside. No, Maxwell said, surprising them both. Lisa stays. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of her. Richard's jaw tightened, but he proceeded. Fine. I've researched facilities while on the plane. Oakmont Senior Living offers specialized Parkinson's care with round-the-clock nursing, physical therapy, neurological specialists on staff. It's one of the best in the state. Only the best money can buy, Dad. They have openings starting next week. And how much does this cost? Lisa asked quietly. Richard barely glanced at her. $15,000 a month plus additional services. But my father's comfort and care are worth any price. Mr. Jones doesn't need the best money can buy, Lisa said, her voice soft but steady. He needs someone who actually cares about him as a person, not a patient. Richard's eyes flashed with anger. And I suppose you think you're that someone? A waitress who can barely afford rent is going to provide better care than trained medical professionals. Richard! Maxwell's voice cracked like a whip. Dad, be realistic. This girl, this woman, Lisa interrupted, steel entering her tone, has shown up every single day. This woman has listened to your father's stories and held his hand and made him feel like his life still has value. What have you done except send money? How dare you? Richard stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. You don't know anything about my relationship with my father. I've been building a business to secure his future, to make sure he never has to worry about... Enough! Maxwell's voice, amplified by years of suppressed pain, cut through the tension like broken glass. His hands trembled violently, but his gaze was steady and fierce. Enough, Richard, just enough. Father and son stared at each other, decades of unspoken hurt crackling in the space between them. Your mother spent 6 months dying, Maxwell said, each word deliberate and devastating. 6 months. Do you know where you were? Dubai is closing the Henderson deal, then Singapore for the property auction, then Los Angeles for the investor meetings. You sent flowers. You paid for experimental treatments. You bought her a hospital room with a view. I was securing her medical care. She didn't want experimental treatments. Maxwell's voice broke. She wanted her son. She wanted you to sit with her, to hold her hand, to tell her you loved her one last time. Your mother said your name with her last breath, Richard, and you weren't there to hear it. The color drained from Richard's face. I was building something for our family. What family? Maxwell demanded. You moved me out of our home 3 months after she died, packed up 40 years of memories into storage and put me in that sterile facility where nobody knows my name. You visit on holidays if your schedule permits. You send automated bank transfers. You bought me this watch for my birthday and had your assistant ship it because you were too busy to bring it yourself. I provide for you. You provide money. Maxwell's voice rose, strong despite the tremor. You provide things. But this young woman has known me for 3 months and shown me more dignity, more humanity than you have in 3 years. She sits with me. She listens. She cares about my stories, my life, who I am beyond a diagnosis and a bank account. Richard's hands clenched into fists. I've given you everything. Everything except what matters. Maxwell's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You can't purchase presents, son. You can't buy back time. And I'm tired of pretending that money is a substitute for love. Real heroes choose kindness, not comfort. If you'd never abandon someone you love for convenience, hit subscribe and comment, I stand with Lisa. Let's prove compassion still wins over cold hearts. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa watched Richard's careful composure crack, seeing beneath it something raw and wounded that he'd spent years hiding behind success and superiority. Dad, Richard said finally, his voice tight. Let me make this right. I'll double the budget and find the absolute best facility. I'll visit more. I'm going home with Lisa. Richard stared at his father as if he'd spoken a foreign language. You can't be serious. I'm going home with Lisa, Maxwell repeated, his voice gaining strength with each word. To her small apartment, where I'll be a person, not a patient number. Where someone will see me, not just manage me. This is insane. Richard turned to Lisa, his expression a mixture of fury and desperation. You're manipulating a sick old man. I'm choosing authentic care over comfortable neglect. Maxwell interrupted. I'm choosing to spend whatever time I have left feeling like my life matters to someone. Richard's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. He looked between his father and Lisa, and for a moment Lisa saw something break in his eyes. Anger, yes, but underneath it, the devastating realization of what he'd lost and how he'd lost it. Fine, Richard said finally, his voice hollow. Do what you want. He turned and walked out, his shoulders rigid with barely contained emotion. The sound of his expensive shoes echoed down the corridor, growing fainter until it disappeared entirely. Maxwell collapsed against his pillows and Lisa was beside him instantly, her arms around him as he shook with silent sobs. You're okay, she whispered. You're going to be okay. Did I just lose my son forever? No. You just told him the truth. What he does with it is his choice. They sat together in the hospital room, holding on to each other while the afternoon light faded through the windows. Neither spoke of Richard, of the future, of all the uncertainties ahead. They simply held on, two people who'd chosen each other when the world offered them loneliness. 3 days later, Lisa helped Maxwell up the narrow stairs to her studio apartment, both of them uncertain about the future, but certain about their choice. If this story has touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up. And if you believe stories like this remind the world what truly matters, subscribe right now. Because every story here stands for love over money and family over pride. 7 years later, Maxwell Jones sat in his wheelchair near the bay window of what had once been Lisa's cramped studio apartment, but was now a modest 2-bedroom home. At 67, Parkinson's had progressed, stealing more of his mobility, but his eyes held a light that had been missing in that hospital room so long ago. Around him, 6 other people sat in a circle, some with visible tremors, others with the telltale stiffness that marked the disease's progression. The fear doesn't go away, Maxwell was saying, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. But you learn that you're more than your diagnosis. You learn that dignity isn't about what your body can do, but about how you choose to live with what you have. The living room bore the marks of accessibility modifications. Grab bars along the walls, a hospital bed tucked discreetly in the corner behind a decorative screen, and medical equipment stored in cabinets that blended with the warm wood furniture. But it was also unmistakably a home. Photographs lined the walls, plants thrived in sunny corners, and a quilt Catherine had made decades ago draped across the back of the couch. This was the weekly Parkinson's support group that Maxwell had started 3 years ago, transforming his own struggle into a lifeline for others facing the same journey. The front door opened, and Lisa Bryan stepped inside, still wearing her nurse's scrubs from Mercy General Hospital's neurology unit. At 30, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned every achievement through determination and sacrifice. Her name badge read, Lisa Bryan, RN, Neurodegenerative Specialist. The same hospital where she'd once lied to get past the nurse's station now employed her in the very department that had treated Maxwell. "Don't let me interrupt," she said softly, setting her bag down and moving to the kitchen to start coffee for the group. The years between that hospital confrontation and this moment had been filled with early mornings and late nights, Lisa studying at the kitchen table while Maxwell slept, both of them helping each other through the hard days. She'd completed her nursing degree, then specialized further, driven by a desire to help others like Maxwell. He'd become her purpose, and in caring for him, she'd discovered her calling. Their daily routine had become a dance of mutual support. Lisa helped Maxwell with his morning medications and physical therapy exercises, and he quizzed her on medical terminology and celebrated every exam she passed. When she doubted herself, he reminded her why she'd started. When his body betrayed him, she reminded him of his worth beyond physical capability. They'd built a family from choice and commitment. Mrs. Mike from next door brought soup every Wednesday. The support group members called each other between meetings. Even the staff at Rosewood Café, where they still had breakfast every Sunday, treated them like beloved relatives. Lisa had dated occasionally over the years, and Maxwell had played the protective father role with endearing enthusiasm, interrogating potential suitors with questions about their intentions and character. The sound of a car in the driveway drew everyone's attention. Through the window, Lisa watched Richard Jones step out. But this wasn't the polished millionaire who'd walked away from the hospital 7 years ago. He wore jeans and a casual shirt, his designer watch replaced with a simple timepiece. His wife, Jennifer, emerged from the passenger side, carefully lifting an infant carrier from the back seat. "Dad?" Richard called as he entered, his voice warm with genuine affection. "Hope we're not too late." Maxwell's face lit up. "Right on time. We just finished the group." Lisa watched as Richard knelt beside his father's wheelchair, his hand resting gently on Maxwell's arm. The transformation in their relationship hadn't happened overnight. It had taken months of difficult conversations, missed attempts, and gradual rebuilding. But Richard had persevered, learning to show up not with money, but with presence. He came every Sunday now, sometimes more, bringing his wife and their 6-month-old son, Maxwell Jr. As the support group members filed out with promises to see each other next week, Richard helped his father move to the more comfortable armchair while Jennifer settled the baby on the couch. The ease between them all spoke of years of shared meals, inside jokes, and chosen family bonds. "I have some news," Richard said once they were settled. "It's official. The Catherine Jones Parkinson's Research Foundation received its nonprofit status this week." Maxwell's eyes filled with tears. "Really? I sold the Los Angeles property, the one Mom always said was too flashy." Richard smiled, his own eyes wet. She was right, it was. But the proceeds will fund 5 years of research into early onset Parkinson's treatment. It's what she would have wanted. He turned to Lisa. "What you would have wanted to. You showed me that success without significance is just noise. That the best investment I could make wasn't in property, but in people." Lisa shook her head. "Richard, you don't owe me anything." "I tried to write you a check last year," Richard said. "You refused it. The year before that, I offered to pay off your student loans. You refused that too." He reached for Jennifer's hand. "But there's something I'd like to ask that you can't refuse." Jennifer smiled and lifted baby Maxwell from his carrier, bringing him to Lisa. We'd like you to be Maxwell Jr.'s godmother, officially part of our family if you'll have us." Lisa took the baby, his tiny hand wrapping around her finger with that innocent trust that transcends all boundaries of race, class, and history. She looked at Maxwell, who was openly crying now, and at Richard, whose expression held 7 years of gratitude and hard-won wisdom. "I'd be honored," she whispered. Maxwell reached out his trembling hand to touch his grandson's head, then looked at his son. "Your mother would be so proud of you. Not for your success, but for this. For understanding that love is measured in moments, not money." Richard nodded, unable to speak. Later, as the afternoon sun painted the living room golden, they gathered around the dinner table that had hosted countless meals, celebrations, and quiet evenings. The doorbell rang, and several support group members returned with desserts, because that was what families did. Mrs. Mike arrived with her famous dumplings. Even the owner of Rosewood Café stopped by with a cake decorated with "Family chosen, cherished, forever." Maxwell, seated at the head of the table with his grandson sleeping peacefully in Lisa's arms, raised his water glass with a shaking hand. "To families we choose and second chances we deserve." Everyone raised their glasses, voices overlapping with affirmations and laughter. Lisa looked around the table at this beautiful, complicated family they'd built from nothing but choice and love. She thought back to that night 7 years ago when she'd stood outside room 412, scared and uncertain but determined to care. She'd thought she was saving Maxwell, but the truth was more complex. He'd saved her too, giving her purpose, direction, and a family she'd never known she needed. "The greatest gifts cost nothing," Lisa said softly, watching Richard help his father with his napkin, the baby's hand curled around her thumb. "Time, attention, presence, love. These are the currencies that matter." As evening fell and the house filled with conversation and laughter, Lisa held baby Maxwell while Richard helped his father to bed, the cycle of care continuing in its beautiful, imperfect way. This was family. Messy, chosen, real. The greatest gift you can give someone costs nothing but means everything. 7 years ago, Lisa Bryan chose compassion over convenience. That choice didn't just save Maxwell Jones. It transformed 3 lives and proved that family isn't defined by blood or wealth, but by the daily decision to show up, to listen, and to love without condition.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.